President Trump and members of his cabinet today sought to downplay a military leak to a journalist. The president praised National Security Advisor Mike Walls, who used an unsecured app on his phone to text messages to more than a dozen high-level administration officials. Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic magazine, was included in that group chat. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth shared military information on plans to attack Yemen with that group on the unsecured app. Despite the leak, the president said Walls had, quote, learned a lesson.
Main thing was nothing happened. The attack was totally successful.
They were running a war plan on a messaging app and didn't even know who was invited into the conversation.
Democratic lawmakers are calling for an investigation. Today, they pressed the issue with the directors of national intelligence and the CIA at a previously scheduled hearing on Capitol Hill. Both of them were in that group message, but they insist nothing classified was shared. Let's talk more about this, and we'll bring in Hal Kemper, a retired Marine intelligence officer and counterterrorism expert. Hal, it's great to see you. Thank you for the time. How significant was this security breach by these top U.S. officials?
Alex, very significant. Of course, that's why you're hearing so much on Capitol Hill and all over D.C. Even our allies overseas are referencing this, the Five Eyes, the countries where we have a fairly transparent intelligence sharing agreement. All of them are concerned about what they saw. This Signal is a messaging app. Yes, it is encrypted, but it's not encrypted for classified communications. And frankly, for things like targeting data, what you're going to hit them with, what platforms being used, the type of weapons, when it's going to happen, all that stuff. That normally is in the classified realm, not necessarily at top secret. That's one of the misnomers that's out there, but it is normally classified. And that was apparently, at least reportedly, discussed within the Signal chat.
Yeah, and you refer to this as some of this, it would seem, as classified information, although we had the president and other top-level officials who said that the information shared was not classified intelligence here. But typically speaking, aren't the specifics of a military operation going to be classified?
Normally they are, and I've been listening to this. Now, there is one thing, the president and these senior officials actually have declassification authority. So technically, they could say when we talked about an unclassified setting that we had implicitly declassified it. I mean, that's an argument that could be made. Right. But normally, when you're talking about upcoming strike mission, that's classified for a very good reason. You've got personnel and assets that are in harm's way, and you don't want to compromise that. And they literally were, according reportedly, what Jeffrey Goldberg said, is they were announcing when they were going to hit hours before it was going to hit. I mean, if that thing had been intercepted by a foreign adversary, Iran, Russia, China, they could have passed that off to the Yemenis, or to the Houthis, I should say, and it could have had very tragic consequences. How
would information like this typically be shared among high-level government officials and military officials?
Well, I got to tell you, one would be face-to-face. That's one of the oldest ways, and that's making sure that you're not within earshot of someone else. The other thing is there are classified systems. There's a couple of different systems, one at the sensitive compartmental level. The other one is a secret system. Normally, this would be something you'd expect, certainly at the secret system, to keep it out of the public domain. This is all classified stuff. And I'm actually, even beyond the targeting details, there were some comments made about our European partners and other things that, frankly, I don't think they want out there in the public domain. The Europeans are taking an exception to what was said. And those are things, that type of candor, if you will, behind closed doors, that's the sort of thing you would do in a classified setting, whether it's online or in person.
All right, so what do you imagine is happening behind the scenes right now? What kind of discussions are happening among these top administration officials trying to make sure that you don't have another leak like this moving forward?
Well, I would say one thing, whatever discussions are happening are probably not happening in a Signal chat group. That's for sure.
That's
all
for
right.
Sure that,
but yeah, I imagine they're having a lot of closed door meetings, a lot of discussion. There's a high degree of damage control, if you will, that's being done. They're trying to figure out, I can see they're trying to get their theme. I mean, I heard the testimony in Congress today, And when you're claiming you can't remember, or you're just making some blanket statement that it wasn't classified and then not being able to follow up on that with why it wasn't classified, that's a very difficult position to be in. A lot of people have said they would have been better just to say we made a huge mistake and just move on, but they've decided to go with the sort of blanket denial thing to say it was, wasn't a mistake or whatever. And I think this is just going to roll on. Jeffrey Goldberg has more that he could release, and he hasn't done that.
Yeah, he specifically said that he was not sharing a lot of the really specific and sensitive information. Obviously, out of concern for not releasing top secret sort of information that the government has at its disposal here. We know obviously the National Security Council now looking into this breach. What do you think are some of the key questions that the council is going to try to answer?
Well, why were they discussing this in the first place? There's multiple levels on this. Number one, there is a legal thing, the Presidential Records Act, Federal Records Act, where was there an intent to hide this from compliance with those acts? That's a legal issue. The other thing is, why wasn't this being done in a classified setting? I think what happened is they were probably during the campaign and the transition, they were using this, encrypted means of communication in order to avoid, public disclosure. But it's a good way to talk about things, and maybe that just kind of carried over. And so it was a bad habit they carried into as they're in office, and they kept using it. And somebody just, in this case, maybe someone like Secretary Hegseth had, volunteered some stuff into that chat that he shouldn't have done. And that's where it started, kind of going out of the realm of a candid discussion to something else. Obviously they're going to discuss why did they have the editor-in-chief of the Atlantic included in their chat group. I mean, that's a huge oversight. And so there's a lot of cleanup they have to do internally to avoid this in the future. But I think what you're going to see is a sobering effect, in that whoever was relying on these chat groups to communicate around D.C. are going to be very reluctant to do so after this whole event.
Yeah, I would imagine so, but a lot more questions that still have to be answered here, and this is certainly not going away anytime soon. Appreciate the perspective, former Marine Intelligence Officer Hal Kemper. Great to have you on, Hal. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.